Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special video episode of the Literacy Center of Expertise podcast, brought to you by TIES, the Immigrant Education Society in Calgary, Alberta, and graciously funded by Immigrants, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. I'm one of your hosts, Jeremy Wilson, and along with my co-host, Donna Clark, I'm excited to bring you this special video episode of the podcast. For this episode, Donna and myself asked several questions to some of our current literacy instructors here at TIES regarding their experiences teaching foundation literacy learners. Questions focused on what has been challenging and surprising when teaching this group of learners, what areas they would like to improve on in their teaching practice, what have been some success stories, and also why they do what they do. We hope you enjoy listening to these instructors sharing their experiences working with this inspiring group of learners.
My name is Osa, and I'm a Literacy Foundation Level 1 instructor. I've been doing that for the past 4 years. But actually, my background is biochemistry. I taught biochemistry in the university. And I'm an immigrant from Nigeria, so I'm originally from Nigeria, but I've been in Canada for the past 8 years. And I've lived in countries where English was not the first language. I lived in Netherlands. I lived in Oman, where Arabic is the first language. Netherlands, Dutch is the first language. And so I've had the experience of having challenges with interacting with those who don't speak English as a first language. So I quite appreciate that. And teaching foundation level class now, I see myself in them. And it's quite interesting teaching this. So right now I'm teaching online, teaching Foundation and Link, Foundation and Literacy 1.
My name is Jenna. I teach a Literacy Foundation Level 1 class. I started at TIES in September of 2019 as a substitute, and I subbed for a Literacy 2-3 class. And then a position opened up for a part-time morning Foundation Literacy 1 class, and so I took that. I definitely got a little thrown into the literacy world before teaching at TIES. I taught university level students and mainly speaking and listening. So teaching literacy has been a big jump for me, but has been an adventure.
Hi, my name is Natalia. I'm a full-time Link instructor with TIES. Been involved with teaching Link students for the last 10 years. And during this time, I taught students from CLB1 to up to university level. For the last 2 years, I've been working with Literacy Foundation students, and it's been quite an experience. So currently I'm teaching a split class, Literacy Foundation CLB1, which means 90% of my students have no previous formal education, even those that are in CLB1 class. And right now I'm piloting a hybrid class as well.
My name is Patricia, and I have been a Link instructor for the past 12 years. After my university degree, I moved to Korea and discovered that I prefer teaching adults over children. And teaching adults has been my passion ever since. When I returned to Ontario, I completed my TESOL Ontario certification along with my TESOL Canada and started teaching Link right away. I moved to Calgary from Ontario 7 years ago and immediately started working at the Immigrant Education Society TIES Link program. I have had experience teaching many CLB levels, and I love the literacy stream best. Recently, I started piloting the hybrid program, and I am teaching a Literacy 1-2 class, which comes with its own challenges, but I look forward to learning and gaining new skills.
What I have found challenging with teaching literacy foundation and literacy level 1 students is that not only are you teaching them the basics of language, but often you're also teaching them the basics of how to interact in the classroom and how to learn. My students all have 6 years or less of education, most of them having 0 or 1 years of education. And so they don't have the strategies that we have since we've been in school to really learn and grasp subjects well. And so not only are you teaching words, but you're also teaching them to take turns and to write their name on the top of their page and write the date on the top of your page. And so you're kind of teaching 2 things at once. And I found that to be difficult and something I've had to adjust to as a literacy teacher.
The biggest challenge I faced when I started teaching Literacy Foundation was the lack of appropriate literacy materials. It was interesting because at first I didn't even know how much about literacy and even how you're supposed to teach literacy. So of course I didn't realize that the font size on the page is too small, or that they can't recognize the Times New Roman A, that using Comic Sans is the correct font, or that there needs to be more white space and visual colors on the page. Of course, all these things came with training and learning and hands-on experience working with learners. And at the end, you also realize how different literacy is from a regular CLB class.
So teaching literacy learners, these are learners with little or no previous formal education, which often results in lack of what I used to take for granted when teaching mainstream CLB learners. So what I noticed, everything needs to be taught, nothing can be assumed. And a lot of students are from oral cultures like Somalia, so they're not familiar with printed materials. So what I had to do when I first started teaching literacy, I had to change my teaching approach. And being a visual learner, I had to remember all the time that most of my students are auditory. So this is their first way of acquiring some knowledge and skills through auditory means. So another thing is that every student requires different material, as they vary greatly in their ability level, depending on their previous experience. So I faced with the lack of material suitable for adult literacy learners. And that's something that I keep working still right now.
Of course, there are many success stories that I came across every day, but one that I want to touch on that is always dear to my heart is the relationships that I built with the women that I taught throughout all these years. I just love helping them build their confidence and empowering them through literacy, not only in the classroom, but the effects it has on their family life and consequently on the roles they play in our society. They are so happy to be outside of their house, meeting new people, learning new things. I've had the privilege to meet many incredible women in my life while teaching. I've seen them go from identifying as just a housewife to making statements like, I can read, I can help my children with their homework, I can get a job, I can get on my iPad and join Zoom and so on. For example, one bright student I had who started in my foundation class and ended up graduating from the CLB level 4 class, moved on to complete her daycare program. Also, one of my students who got her driver's license for the first time, or the woman who was able to read her bills at home, or the woman who started her baking business, to the woman who was able to free herself from domestic violence. I'm truly honored to have had the privilege of knowing and sharing my days with such powerful, determined, and resilient women.
For me, I have a student from Congo. She has no formal education at all before coming to TIES. And it was quite surprising to see that she could not even hold the pencil. no motor skills at all. She couldn't hold a pencil. I had to hold her hand to hold a pencil. And she couldn't use a pair of scissors. So she lacked motor skills completely, apart from not having the language skills. But now she can hold a pencil, she can write her name, and she can hold a pair of scissors and cut paper. For me, that's a big success story. And apart from writing her name, you can see her trying to copy other things from the board. It takes quite a long time for her to do any copying. But the fact that she can now hold her pencil herself and hold a pair of scissors, that's a big success story for me.
With literacy students, we can see success stories every day, starting from being able to spell their names or copy their phone number or addresses. So if you've been a teacher for higher levels, sometimes you don't even consider that to be a success, but for literacy students, every simple or small step is a success. So I want to mention in particular, a student from Yemen. She was a student in my class last semester. She's a widow who came to Canada with her 5 kids. And usually her children help her in situations when she doesn't have enough English skills to cope with. So based on my class needs assessments last semester, we decided to study the theme of banking. The students practiced basic math skills, counting money, giving change, and doing some simple budgeting even. They also learned how to talk to a bank teller, to greet them, to explain the problem, to make a request. So one day when the student came to class, she was super excited. So she was eager to share a story. So she told us that she went to her bank branch to pay some bills. And as usual, she took her daughter to help her translate and do everything instead of her. But this time was different. So she decided to take a risk and try to do everything by herself. So she said, I said hello, I greeted the bank teller, I followed the instructions, I inserted my bank card, I entered the PIN, and then I even told the teller what I wanted to do. So it was a real success story. You should have seen her eyes. She was so excited. And I was happy that she was confident enough to apply in real life what we learned in classroom.
Often when I'm teaching literacy foundation students, I teach a language in small chunks. So I like, and so if you're teaching food, you talk about I like apples, I like bananas. But sometimes it's hard for these students to apply these small chunks of language to other situations. And I was teaching there is and there are. So we were talking about there is 1 apple, there are 2 apples. And I had an assessment on an unrelated topic with my student. And at the time we were using Zoom as our online platform. And I had the student in a breakout room. And after we had finished the assessment, I was trying to explain to him how to leave the breakout room by himself. And so to leave the breakout room, you had to press 2 blue buttons. So I showed him the pictures of the buttons, and I was emphasizing you need to press 2 blue buttons. And he looked at me and with a little bit of confusion in his eyes, and he just said, there are 2 blue buttons. And I was so proud that he was able to take this chunk that I had taught him in one context, and he was starting to able to apply it to other contexts in his life. And so that for me stands out as a success story for one of my students.
For me, I'm always amazed at the energy and determination that I see in my students, because I see people with very modest means and lack of education and usually lack of support, but they're not afraid to take risks, make mistakes. Then they're eager to learn, even when they're dealing with everyday challenges of life, like housing, childcare, budgeting, transportation, and very often family issues back home. So I saw that they have a goal and they're doing everything possible to reach it. So that was a very amazing thing that I noticed right away when starting teaching literacy students.
Oh, there are definitely a few things, but one of a few examples I'm going to give you. Many of the students don't have learning strategies to rely on. So I had to do a lot more repetition, recycling of material, and constant scaffolding. I feel like I'm scaffolding all the time, which really slowed the pace of the class. So that was a bit surprising. You also have to realize that you're teaching, for example, one letter a day. Today we're teaching A, tomorrow we're teaching B, and so on and so on. Or that 3 to 5 new vocabulary words is more than enough for the day if you want your students to retain that information. I always took that embodied kinesthetic approach to my teaching, and it's a big part of me. And I felt that being in a literacy class, I had to be up and moving even more to help them maintain the focus and internalize the material they were learning. And those were just two of the many surprising things I started when I started teaching literacy.
In this world where everything depends on technology, I want to improve my skills in technology so that I won't be a student like my students. So that my students will not be the one teaching me technology. I will have to be at least one step ahead of them. So I want to improve my skills in technology and learn so many new apps or whatever way I can improve my teaching and make my class more interesting and prepare materials and all kinds of resources that will help me to, help the students to achieve their goals. So I need to work on improving my technology skills.
As part of my personality, I like to have a plan, and I like my plan to go according to plan. Even in planning my lessons, I usually plan more than I need. I'll plan an extra 2 or 3 activities than I know that I need, just so that I can have everything kind of in a neat little box. But I found with teaching literacy students that often things don't go according to plan, that sometimes my class goes a little sideways. And I'm trying to learn how to, instead of getting frustrated that things aren't going according to my plan, embracing the change that's happening and embracing something as an opportunity to really teach my students something. And so instead of getting frustrated that my students don't understand something that I really thought that they would understand, taking that opportunity to really dive into the thing they don't understand and use it to further their learning.
Teaching people is always rewarding, and I find a lot of fun seeing students succeed in something that they were not able to do before. I also like hands-on activities that were involved in games, competitions, and usually literacy foundation students or low-level students are more open to these kind of activities. So they're not like, academic students that need to have a lot of literature and questions and quizzes. So they like to learn like kids. And that's really something that brings me joy. I'm thinking about the fact that teachers for low-level literacy students are like this bridge between them and the Canadian culture they're part of right now. So they share their sad stories and their happy stories with us. So we're like one big family. So their classmates like to ask them about their families, about their cultures. So even after the class is over, my students can text me and ask, Natalia, how are you doing? or Natalia, how are you? So this is this small talk, which is part of real life that we continue, and I don't mind doing that. So I know that becoming literate is a hard work for adults, especially for adults. And they learn the skills, the concepts, and the behaviors. It may take a long time. So, what really surprises me is how much they're determined to get successful, to get a job, to find their place in the Canadian society. And I'm happy to be part of this. I'm happy to be part of this success.
Well, I've always loved teaching, but more especially, I think I'm happy when I see people happy. And, when my students come to class, maybe the first day of class, they are kind of coming in wondering what school is all about, because foundation class is for students who have not really had formal education. So at the end of the day, when I see students who came in at the beginning, looking kind of maybe timid, now very happy, excited, communicating with their classmates, and, having fun in class, it gives me a lot of joy. So it makes me to feel like going back all the time to keep on teaching the students. Students who cannot say A or cannot even say how are you, at the end of the semester, you can see they are now communicating with one another, they communicate with you, and they are happy you are adding value to life, especially as they are also immigrants like myself. Then it makes me feel very, very happy, and I always want to go back and to keep on teaching. So for me, that is something I look forward to all the time.
I do what I do because I have so much fun building relationships with my students, which is the most important thing for me when teaching literacy. I think the best learning happens when the student can trust you and feel comfortable and safe in your classroom. And that is what I love doing. I love helping learners be themselves, feeling free and bringing out the best in them. And I think throughout this kind of classroom environment, I'm able to provide for them. I am hopefully helping them integrate into Canadian society. Not only are you impacting your learners' lives and helping them integrate into society, but the amount of knowledge and things that you learn from your students every day is just incredible. And I think having these two-way learning experiences, I can help other new Canadians understand, our newcomers to Canada.
The reason why I keep teaching literacy is because of my students. And I see their determination and their bravery. A lot of my students came to Canada not out of choice, but out of necessity. And back in their home countries, they were able to function. They had jobs. They had livelihoods that they knew how to do, and they came to Canada and are suddenly thrown into a culture and are surrounded by a language that they're unfamiliar with, and they have to start over again. And I love being part of one of the first people that they spend extended amount of time with. And language is in a lot of ways independence. And most of my students have to rely on their children or friends or translators to get them through each day. But as they go through English class and as they learn, they start to gain their independence back, and they start to gain their confidence back in operating in this culture. I had one student who came into my class and didn't know a word of English. I said, "How are you?" And he looked at me, and his daughter had to translate for him what my question was, and then translated his answer back. And by the end of the semester, he had gained a lot of skills, and he was moving up to the next level. And I was in my final meeting with him and explaining what would come next, who his new teacher would be. And this was a middle-aged Moldovan man. He was a little bit scary and very direct. But during this meeting, he started to tear up, and he had written something down. And I didn't quite understand everything, but he was trying to express how thankful he was that he was starting to be able to speak and interact with Canadian culture. And whenever I have days that are discouraging and I feel like my students aren't getting anywhere, or I feel like they're frustrated, I just remember that and remember that they're here and they're learning and they're trying, and they're gaining their independence through that. And I'm happy to give them the tools to be able to do that.